We're snorting cap rates and shooting up cash flow here at Deal Junkies. Welcome back to Deal Junkies. We're a real estate podcast. I'm Gabe Johansson. I'm here with Trevor Howard and Dane McKinney and our special guest, Logan deVos. We are going to do a little sub-episode here and talk a bit about the SMI Fund Management business. Logan is the CEO of SMI Fund Management. And we want to I'll give you a little bit of backstory of how we got here, and then we're going to let Logan give us more detail on how it all works. But Logan and I have known each other for a number of years now. I think I met you actually at that Albany meeting in 2012, I think it was. So maybe 12 years ago now.
Yeah, that was the First Oregon Chapter National Council of Exchangers. It has since dropped its NC affiliation and just become the Albany Brokers meeting. But it used to be
that's easier to say.
Equity traders.
And so this is just after your paintball business. I meet you. You're probably Logan's probably 20. Well, you said you're 36 now, so you're 24 then.
Yeah, that's right.
How old are you, Dane? 24?
24.
So I met Logan when he was your age. Logan and I became fast friends, and we started brokering deals together, and I learned a lot from Logan during that time. But we also decided we wanted to buy deals together, and so we started partnering. And like anybody that gets into this, you realize you can do it faster with partners, and we bought little deals, and we worked our way up to bigger deals. And Logan talked about the 100-plus unit project that we bought a couple of years ago. So, we did it in I think we did that in kind of a short period of time, but I guess it has been a number of years. We've probably been buying deals together for 7 or 8 years or something like that. So
yeah,
it's been a while. So anyway, to sort of wrap up my intro to this, we saw the value in getting our name on a lot of different pieces of real estate, and then wanted to get into bigger deals. And when we found our big deal, to do a 9-legged exchange is super complex. I call that Logan's magnum opus. And I think that the light bulb really went on at that point where we realized that we've got all these little scattered assets and all these loans mixed up and all these partners and all this stuff. And if we can consolidate that, it's a lot easier to control and move into bigger deals and make more money. I think this is definitely a numbers game, and the economies of scale, especially in multifamily, the more doors you have, the more opportunity for profit. So with that, Logan came up with the concept that we should start a fund. And we had been talking for probably 4 or 5 years about having a syndication arm of SMI and allowing our partners and our clients and our friends and our family and all these folks who had been coming to us already and saying, hey, we want into one of your deals. And we just didn't have a real simple, clean mechanism in place, I don't think, to just go like, sure, come on in and let's do a deal. So out of that idea, SMI Fund Management was born, as is the SMI Legacy Fund. And so we're going to let Logan kind of expand on that a little bit for us today and tell us the thinking behind why should we syndicate deals? What are the benefits of doing that? And if somebody wanted to join us and come into deals with us, what would that look like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Legacy Fund, I think, was our initial brainchild, right? Our open-ended fund that I at least am planning to have represent a very large, probably majority portion of my own portfolio. So we made some initial contributions into that, but would like to continue contributing into it. For me, one of the driving motivations for getting the fund together has been deal efficiency. So I've talked before about having partners really from day one. Some of them were past clients, some of them weren't. But it can be tricky when you're dealing with tenant in common relationships like TICs, tenant in common. They have some excellent tax efficiencies and the capacity to split the sheets and go your own directions with your own individual 1031 exchanges when you exit a property, but they become a barrier in debt negotiations, maximizing finance negotiations, and they can just become challenging. I'll use the vicinity apartments that you referenced again as an example. So not only do we have a 9-legged exchange, but we've got 9 different tenant in common relationships. So each one of those exchanges had a tick interest, tenant in common interest. So we're bringing those 2 ticks in. So when we're negotiating that loan, we're needing to negotiate essentially 6 different borrowers in tenant in common format, which for a lender, a tenant in common format is harder to work with because each borrower has a real property interest. And so it needs to qualify on its own, essentially, and meet the full underwriting. And I'd been struggling trying to find efficiencies to this kind of puzzle and gridlock of deal making for years, and broke ground on that. But ultimately, the goal of getting a large chunk of the assets and the partners that are interested in doing this under one umbrella, so we can just act on behalf of that umbrella and that limited liability company. That was the goal, and that's what the SMI Legacy Fund is.
Where'd you get the idea for so legacy funds, for those who are not familiar, you can see it on our website, smifundmanagement.com. We're doing something that nobody that I've seen, at least on the West Coast, is doing, where we allow people to actually contribute their real estate into our fund for exchange in equity ownership of all the assets in that portfolio. That's a new idea. Is that something you saw and you copied, or did you just think of this one?
Why do we come up with that niche? Well, I wanted to be an investor in the SMI Legacy Fund, and all of my wealth is in equity. So and I wanted my partners to participate too. So part of it was solving the puzzle. Well, we got real estate equities. I remember Jerry Fox. He was one of my early on mentors. Hammered in my head, there's a big difference between cash and equity. Not that one's better or worse than the other, but there's a big difference. Equity. So we're not in cash. We have to figure out, okay, how do we get under the umbrella? So it's called the 721 exchange because it's referring to section 721 of the Internal Revenue Code. Just like a 1031 exchange is referring to section 1031. So it's the body of tax law that deals with contributions into partnerships and converting from what you contribute in, which in this case is a real property interest, and that converts into a partnership interest in the LLC or whatever partnership entity you're using. It doesn't have to be a limited liability company, though that's what the SMI Legacy Fund is. So it's a defined section of the tax code. It's not like we reinvented the wheel. It'd be, the 4 of us in this room could say, hey, we each own a house. Let's put it under one umbrella. So what you're doing is just like in a 1031 exchange, you're contributing the property and you're deferring your tax basis into the limited liability company. And that tax basis then represents your tax basis in the partnership.
What's the most common way you think people are using the tax code 721 for today? I mean, is it people going into REITs or DSTs, or where does that?
No, the DST. I mean, I'm not an authority on the REITs or the DSTs, but the DST is Delaware Statutory Trust, and that's actually using a separate body of tax law, and kind of similar to the 1031 exchange. It came out of a ruling, a case, and so did the 1031. 1031 is actually from Oregon. It came out of the timber industry. Starker, he went out and was getting folks to buy him land with trees on it and trade it rather than paying him cash for the timber. So, but it excuse me, it came out of a case, which is why you have all of these erroneous rules with the 1031 as far as timelines and stuff go. It's the merits from that.
You think the 721 then is not used commonly?
The reason that you don't, like I say, we didn't invent this wheel. We didn't invent the tax code. It's a defined section of the code. What's unique about it in this field for a real estate fund is that you need to have a sponsor where SMI Fund Management is the sponsor, essentially the organizer, the leader. Somebody's got to put the fund together and manage it. So you can't, a 1031 exchange is just a transaction between two parties. The sellers, buyer and seller, have to participate in it, agree to participate in it. The sale agreement, almost all of them say, hey, you will, because it doesn't cost or affect the seller at all. But you can't just go find your own piece of real estate and say, hey, I want a 721 exchange into that. There has to be a facilitator, a manager of the fund. And so that's what's a bit more unique. There are other companies doing it. And after we came up with the formula, brainstormed the formula with the attorney and said that we think this is a good avenue in order to affect contributing our property in, which also led to, there's a lot of other people in this same boat. There's a lot of, I see this in deal making all the time, where you have somebody, the whole reason they're selling the real estate is they want to get away from the duty of owning the real estate. They want to get away from the personal recourse on the debt. They want to get away from as much liability. Mm-hmm. And so then they're weighing, well, I sell the asset and cash out. I've got to pay recapture taxes. I've got to give up the stepped up basis. And so it kind of morphed into, first and foremost, how do we get our equity inside the fund? How do we get our close partners' equity inside the fund? A syndication is just the pooling of multiple parties' resources to work together, right? So if we put all of our equities in, now we go do another deal, we're doing that deal on behalf of all of us, and we can buy a larger deal. I can buy a larger deal if I've got 5 partners in it than I can buy on my own. So that's what a syndication is. So first we figure out how do we get ourselves in under this same umbrella, and then we really realize, well, this is taking advantage of that code is. And offering that as a niche of the SMI Legacy Fund, I think we got a demographic of investors that would be very appealing to.
Yeah, I often say that real estate is the greatest wealth creation tool in the history of man, but it has a very murky sort of exit strategy for a lot of folks. They build a ton of wealth, and they're not quite sure once they have it what to do with it. Should I sell and pay taxes? Should I sell and try to complete a 1031 and go fight for a deal? Should I sell on a contract and become the bank? Like, there's a lot there are options, but they're not all super easy options. And so one of the easiest would be just to go borrow money against it. But if you're at a certain age where you don't want to take on more debt, a lot of folks just don't want to have to pull their equity out through debt. So
from a risk standpoint, and also just an annoyance standpoint, like working with lenders, you got to do your annual audits, you got to send documents, keep them apprised on it. There's a lot of work involved, not only in getting the loan, but keeping the loan.
Yeah,
and it's
a full-time job.
Yeah.
So this gives this is solving a problem for those out there if they trust our team and SMI Fund Management to be good shepherds of their equity, to have the opportunity to give up the day-to-day management, the risk of being on the debt, the tort liability of lawsuits and things that can arise out of owning real estate. They can pass along the things they don't want about the real estate to this fund and still maintain the benefits of ownership. Like, if somebody comes into the fund with their equity, contributes their property in, do they still get their cash flow that they were getting? Do they still get all the things that you would get?
So in a real estate investment, you have the opportunity for 4 economic returns. Spendable income, that's your cash flow. Principal reduction, right? Your loan is amortizing down, your assets paying it off. So, if you're doing it right, you're getting cash flow, and that's in addition to the fact that your mortgage is getting serviced and paid down. Then you have tax shelter, and it comes in a lot of different forms. We'll lump it into one, but you have depreciation, you have the stepped up basis. You pass away, your estate is going to receive the stepped up basis, and they're only going to pay capital gains tax on anything that is sold for above and beyond that point of time, the value established at that point of time. And then you have appreciation, the opportunity for appreciation in the asset. So the SMI Legacy Fund preserves all of that. You contribute your real property in, and let's say, rather than owning 100% of this duplex that you own, you now own a 2% of the diversified real estate holding, the portfolio that the fund has. So you're still getting quarterly distributions based off of the spendable income that the fund earns, the rental income. You're realizing principal reduction. So the fund utilizes debt, not an extreme amount. It utilizes about 55 to 60% loan to value, global loan to value.
And the contributor doesn't have to sign on to that debt.
That's correct. So for the contributor, it's non-recourse. You and I got to sign the debt. We have our personal guarantees on that. But no, it is. So they still get the interest deduction, but it's qualified non-recourse to the contributor. And so they don't have to, not only do they not have the risk profile associated with the personal recourse, but they don't have to participate in the financing activities. So they don't have to sign loan documents. They don't even have to sign carve-outs or bad boy clauses. And they maintain the tax benefits associated with real estate. So if you're joining the fund through a 721 contribution as compared to joining through a cash contribution, then your partnership interest in the fund is going to be equal to, not your partnership interest, your partnership tax basis is going to be equal to the tax basis in your real estate.
So it follows you.
It follows you in
correctly.
Correct. But then when the fund makes acquisitions, right? So it already has. Last year we purchased the Lebanon Apartments in Lebanon. That was a value add, multifamily, arm's length transaction. So that's a new asset. We picked up a new distribution schedule. That's divvied up on a pro rata basis among the investors inside the fund. And so it's an opportunity not only to preserve those benefits, but now the fund is increasing those benefits.
So I have a depreciation schedule coming in, and now I get to benefit from a depreciation schedule that's actually growing over time.
Exactly.
It's not just the schedule that I brought with me when I contributed.
Correct. Your original schedule comes in with you, and then we add to your schedule as we grow the fund and make acquisitions.
Okay. So if you were ever to go sell my property that I contributed, the fund would do a 1031 exchange.
That's correct.
With my property.
Correct. Okay. So the fund is really, I think the best way to think about it, this won't fit all investors. It fits me and it fits a lot of the investors, is that the investors that are joining the fund, they were working towards these benefits throughout their investment career. Kind of like you said, real estate's one of the, is the best wealth creator. But then they decided to stop, right? Like, so they were successful with it. They exchanged from small properties into bigger properties to get larger depreciation, more principal reduction, more cash flow, more appreciation. But eventually you everybody's in a different phase of their investment life cycle. So I'm still on the early side. I've been at this for, 15 plus years, but I've still got 20 at least 20 more years to go before, I've matured in that. And so it's very common that that investors' assets are, their depreciation is depleted. They don't have any more left. They've played the loan down quite a bit, but they're happy and satisfied. They've got more spendable income, than they've had before, because spendable income appreciates just like values appreciate. They work hand in hand. And usually investors know, I could work this portfolio harder. I could go buy something bigger. I just don't want to anymore. And so the fund is opportunity to let somebody else work that.
Passing the baton.
Yeah, passing the baton, and you become a limited investor. So
truly passive, really. I mean,
truly passive.
Yeah, which is, for most of us, we think we're getting into a passive real estate investing. We realize pretty quickly that that's not the case. It's not passive at all. But
it's a tax term.
Yeah, it's a tax term. But coming into a fund like this, it would truly be passive. You give up control, but you give up a lot of risk. You give up the day-to-day headache of it, and you benefit still from the four financial benefits of owning real estate still.
Yeah, the four economic benefits. And you get to participate in efficiency. So one example is the investor that doesn't want to work the portfolio as hard anymore, knows it'll be profitable and is still motivated by the greed of doing that, but not motivated enough that they're actually going to do it. But then there's other investors that the fund just outperforms what they could do on their own. So there's a big difference between owning a duplex and owning a 20-unit complex or a 50-unit complex. Differences in efficiency, both from a management perspective, property management, asset management, from a debt perspective. There's efficiencies in larger loans. If you borrow $10 million, you're going to get a better interest rate. It's going to be fixed for a longer period of time. You're likely to get a higher amount of leverage if that's what you're after. For the bank, it's the product. So just, any industry, bulk is usually cheaper, right? Mm-hmm. It's wholesale. So you're going to get the efficiencies there. But then the biggest one is the human efficiency in how that portfolio is being operated. So the legacy fund is still early in its lifespan, but I'll take the deal that we already closed on and is moving through its cycle as an example, and that's the Lebanon Apartments. So that's a property that we bought for $100,000 a unit. These are predominantly 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath units. We actually got excellent seller financing on it, 5% interest only. We bought it for $2.6 million. Our as completed appraisal, which supports our own internal expectations, is that it's going to be a $4.2 million property, and we're going to need to put about $600,000, $700,000 into it. So we're driving, and this is to take place over roughly a 3-year period of time, right?
So there's $1 million in upside there.
Correct. Exactly. Okay. And so we're driving value and taking the asset through its value add life cycle there, and that's the human capacity component of it. Inside the fund, we are able to use all of the investors, pool the investors' resources to tackle that, and that's where the efficiency of being able to take on a lot more of those transactions. Mm-hmm. And as an example, if I owned, I often look at it, so it's like, so an investor's putting in their fourplex. Well, if I owned their fourplex, I'd be out looking for the Lebanon Apartments. I'd be looking for the 26-unit apartment complex that I can take a $500,000 equity and then turn it into $1.5 million equity. Substantially more spendable income, substantially more principal reduction. I'm picking up new depreciation, which means more tax loss today. Mm-hmm. And just keeping all things equal, do a simple number. If you've got a $500,000 fourplex, 4% appreciation, let's say that's 20% per year. So this is pre-value add.
20,000.
20,000, thank you. Yeah, per year in appreciation. Well, if you got 4% on a $4 million asset, that's $160,000 per year. So you can see progressing those forward, whether you're doing it in a niche like value add acquisitions where you think you can drive that process faster, just doing fundamental real estate investment practices, you can work that equity a lot harder. So the fund provides an opportunity that I don't own that investor's fourplex, but when it comes into the fund, now I do control it. And we're able to work that. And that's the efficiency of being able to work our own equities and portfolios, as well as allowing other investors to come in and simply doing it at a larger scale.
Okay. So if you're out there and you're listening and you own real estate already and you're thinking you don't want the day-to-day responsibility of running it, or this sounds interesting to you, reach out to us. 721 Exchange, the SMI Legacy Fund is only one thing we do. And by the way, if a broker has a deal or somebody that wants to bring a deal to the SMI fund management team, commissions can be paid on all this, and just like if we were to buy a deal, or how does that work?
Correct. Yeah, commissions can be paid. The real estate broker is sticking to their professional real estate activities, so they're representing the asset that's being transacted. So a real estate broker can't go out and become a promoter for the fund and sell membership interests in it. But if they've got a listing on a transaction, and the SMI Legacy Fund brings that in through contribution, the broker can earn their commission in that transaction.
Okay. Trevor?
Yeah, I have a selfish question. So on 721 exchanges, I'm just thinking, like, how can we personally use this as we're investing? And you jump in and speak a little better. So we're looking at a storage complex that we've tried to structure creatively.
We structured it creatively.
We structure it creatively. It doesn't work how we like it once we start underwriting it further. And I'm just thinking, as you're talking about this, like, could we use a 721 exchange, bring his property into the partnership, bring some financing in to get him some cash out that he wants?
So I did this during the Great Recession. Actually, there was a transaction. So I think this was around 2011, maybe. And there was a principal I know. He was a real estate broker, and he had purchased a property in Washington. I think it was a 26 unit apartment complex. And he went into the transaction knowing that he needed to put about $150,000 into renovations. When he went in, so 2011 is when I became part of put this deal together, joined him at using the 721. So he went into it around like 2009. So we had a lot of volatility still ahead of us, and he was a real estate broker. So his commissions went down dramatically, and that $150,000 that was supposed to go into the asset didn't. And so what ended up happening is about 50% of the units are offline. They're not rentable. And the thing's no longer cash flowing. In fact, it's negatively cash flowing. And so we were working on it together, trying to figure out, okay, how can we get this resolved? What kind of joint venture can we put together? So that's exactly what we did. We formed a new limited liability company. Both parties were represented. So I got my attorney involved. He had his attorney involved. So we said, okay, we're going to form a new limited liability company. The principal contributed the apartment complex into it. I contributed some cash into the LLC. So we both made contributions into the LLC, cash and real property. We got permission from the lender to do this. It was he had bought it on seller financing. So it was a private party that we were negotiating with. And for them, this was not something they wanted to fight. They knew this property was in duress. To hear somebody there is going to bring cash in. So we used my cash to start getting the units online and stabilizing the asset. And then we, in a nutshell, we rode through the Great Recession, and we sold it and exited it. And so in an LLC, it's nice too. We had some good tools. So when the property in 2011 was worth reasonably less than what he bought it for in 08 or 09. And what we did is we allocated actually 100% of priority on distributions towards him until it hit that original value. And so if we sold it in 2014, for example, and let's say he bought it in 09 for $1 million, the first $1 million in 2014 all went back to him. Then we came up with a ratio after that of essentially how we would split the gravy, the upside, the profit that didn't exist today. Mm-hmm. And so we did. We sold it, I want to say it was around 2014, it might have been 2015, the market had stabilized, values went up quite a bit. And so it was quite a win-win because I got an incredible amount of leverage, right? So I got to assume the existing debt. I got to, for lack of a better term, assume all of the equity that this principal already had in it. And For the other party, it was a good deal too because I brought liquidity in. We didn't have any transaction costs. There was no brokerage fees or anything like that to put this together.
So could we do ours in a similar way, but could we bring in new financing, have him do a partial 721 exchange so we get him some money out through the new financing, plus we get to come in with no cash because we're bringing debt? Would that?
Sure. You can leave him in. It's just a JV agreement, right? I mean, you're talking about having him stay in the deal?
Yeah, it seems like the new debt may throw a wrench in it, though, as you're bringing that in and doing the 721.
Well, if the debt is taken out afterwards, and it can be immediately afterwards, that's a finance event. So you need to, always make sure that the other principal is getting their own legal and accounting advice. Because finance events are not outright tax-free, but in most cases they are. So the formula, you can do a partial contribution and partial sale. So in your circumstance, let's say that there's $1 million worth of equity on the table. The seller, let's say, they could contribute $800,000 tax-free into your joint venture, and you could buy $200,000 worth, which would essentially be 20%, right? And so then they're going to have tax exposure on that $200,000, but they're going to defer the $800,000 in, or they could complete a 1031 exchange on that $200,000. So we see that in the legacy fund as well, that if there's sufficient equity in there, and the fund is motivated to bring the asset in, the fund can purchase a portion of the property and take a portion of it in on contribution. And if there's enough equity there, the fund doesn't necessarily need to use its own liquidity for the purchase. It can use the equity that's already in the asset.
But to your point, Trevor, you're saying that the loan covenants may prohibit his contribution, or I guess it would depend. If he were to have more than 20% ownership, he would definitely have to sign on the new debt.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to structure it simultaneously as well, right? So I don't know if that would work.
I think it'll work.
You think so?
Yeah.
You know more about the deal than me, but we were structuring it with notes, seller carries, mixed bank financing, all this stuff beforehand. The underwriting didn't work. We were just going to bleed. I didn't think we could get the income to where we needed at. But he's open to some different creative structures, so we were just trying to brainstorm how can we make this deal work still. But
yeah, in a nutshell, if the seller is willing to stay in, the 721 contribution means that they're an equity participant, right? So if the seller says, "Hey, I'll leave a certain amount in this deal as a partner," they're probably going to be a limited partner. You can make that work. You need to, and the lender is going to be part of that as well, right? But if it's structured correctly and disclosed correctly, it doesn't hurt the lender's position. It just means that there's another principal in there. Yeah. Depending on what type of lender you're working with, they may or may not need to be part of the guarantor package. But
when you came into your deal, did you make the seller a limited partner, or were you a limited partner, or you guys?
We actually shared it. So the formula, there's pros and cons to being. This was an LLC, so for all intents and purposes, limited partner, general partner. From a practical standpoint, that's an easy language to use. So. There was no limited partner. We both had management rights in it. We defined in our operating agreement what the business plan was and how long we had, how money needed to be spent and when the asset was gonna be exited. And when you have limited partners, you have more exposure as for being a sponsor, right?
Because they're more of an investor.
A fiduciary, exactly. You have a greater fiduciary. So like in the legacy fund, we have a very high fiduciary to the investors that when everybody's on equal footing in the control that they have, there's still a fiduciary duty, but it's more equal between the partners. The more control you have, the more duty and responsibility you have, and the higher higher standard you're held to. You can think of a real estate licensee as the same way. If you're a real estate licensee, you're held to a higher duty, a higher conduct just in business than
because you hold the license
than the principal, exactly, than the non-licensed principal.
I'm going to move us on. I know you guys could talk all day about this, but I want to make a point that SMI Fund Management does not only do SMI Legacy Fund, we also do single asset,
single purpose, single asset and single purpose.
Okay, so explain that to me.
Yeah, so the legacy fund is open-ended. You can think of it kind of like a real estate investment trust. So that's for the party that wants to contribute either their real property or just wants to contribute cash in. Says, I've got $100,000 and I want to invest with you guys for 20 years and I want you to take advantage of 1031 exchanges and up-legging into bigger stuff. A single asset, single purpose offering, I call it a more traditional offering. There's a lot more of those on the marketplace. If you go to crowdstreet.com, for example, you're going to see, ABC storage complex. We're going to buy this storage facility. We're going to turn it around, stabilize it, sell it in 4 years, and here's how much money we plan to make off of it. And we need to raise $4 million in equity to do it. So as an investor, you're making a commitment to one specific deal for a defined period of time, which is typically a shorter period of time. So SMI Fund Management is facilitating those transactions, syndications as well. And as you know, we're about to close out on our first substantial offering of the Hickory Lake Apartments in Lebanon, a 60 unit new construction build out where we're going to build it, stabilize it, hold it for a couple of years, exit. We're targeting 2028, and we're expecting an internal rate of return to our investors of around 17%. So investors that are making a commitment to that, there's no 721, so that's just cash, and it's specific to that deal. And that is, there's a symbiotic relationship between the legacy fund and the single purpose asset offerings. They work together and help each other. So, for example, the legacy fund is making a co-investment on the Hickory Lake Apartments. It's taking about a 10% position. The legacy fund is not large enough to take on that transaction by itself. That's a $17 million deal once it's built out. And even if it was large enough, that would be a high concentration of its resources into one deal. So the legacy fund has the opportunity to cut it down to size, the amount that how much capital, how much liquidity are we looking to place, and participate in it. And the single asset entity has provides a more traditional offering for the investor that says, I love that deal. I love what you guys are doing, but I've got $100,000. I don't want to commit it for 20 years. I want to do this deal. And then when I get paid off, and we exit, I want to look at the other deals that you guys have on the table. And so there's nothing wrong with that approach to investing. And so we want to capture that audience, and we want to be able to bring those types of transactions to fruition. And so that's where the two offerings can really work together. So that's a new construction delivery. A lot of what, your and mine's greatest experience, where we've done the most deals in value add offerings. Right. And so it provides an opportunity for the legacy fund to not only participate, but the legacy fund can complete 1031 exchanges and then when it comes time to exit, the legacy fund can exchange out. The investors that only wanted to commit to that deal, they're not 1031's not an option for them. It's not a benefit they're looking to pursue. They want to cash out by nature of committing to one deal. And so we're able to get a little bit of the best of both worlds there, and we're able to handle a greater delta of deal types and deal sizes.
So in a single purpose deal, I could bring cash in. The idea is it's got a shorter window. The business plan might be 3 to 5 years. I'm going to make returns. I'll have cap gains, but at that time, I can't do a 1031 or roll into something else. We're going to take that profit, pay tax, recycle if we want to into future offerings. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So, questions. You guys have anything for Logan on this? Syndication's kind of easy. I mean, it's just we're pooling resources to go out and do bigger deals. If you like us and you know us and you trust us and you want to invest with us, we welcome you to join us with either contributing your properties into the SMI Legacy Fund or joining us on these single-purpose syndication, single asset entity syndications. We have currently one available that's closing soon, Hickory Lake. I don't know if by the time this podcast is out, we'll probably already be closed, but we have more coming. So
yeah, we're just closing the equity gap on that anyway. So, but we'll have more close behind.
There'll still be maybe some time to get in.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anything else before we wrap this one up? All right, guys. We're here with Logan deVos, CEO of SMI Fund Management. We're the Deal Junkies, and we will see you next time.